Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I am Mike Branson Smith, and I am here with
Jim Groom.
Yes, Jim Groom. We are on to a new set of films, 5 films by Alfred Hitchcock, the first of which is Shadow of a Doubt, the ordinary family that is not so ordinary from Santa Clara, California. Hitchcock's first Santa Rosa, thank you. It's all California. It's all so typical.
It's not all the same, man.
It's look
Don't
out,
say
it's
that.
California, USA.
We love you, all you California listeners, and I won't let Michael.
You spent a lot of time in California, so your affections are clear. I understand that. I'm East Coaster for life, sadly.
I love some of my California people, and I love Los Angeles, which many people don't. But I do.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to wade into that discourse, but Shadow of a Doubt is Alfred Hitchcock's first American film, and he was searching for this story about typical America, right? I think that's an interesting thing, that the ordinary, the normal, the typical American family, and he wants to bring a bit of menace in there. And there is this wonderful little documentary that was made early on. I would guess probably about 20 years ago or so, the making of Hitchcock's Shadow of Doubt. You can find it on YouTube if you want to watch it. And there's a great interview with Teresa Wright in there, talking about how she got her role, and this wonderful story about, everybody wants to do a Hitchcock film. It's like everybody's fantasy to do one. And this is before, and again, he's still frankly a very new American director, even though he's British, of course. And she describes how he didn't even give her the script. He invited her to his home or office, I don't recall, and he just walked her through the story, bit by bit. And she was talking about she was enthralled, he's such a thriller ultimately.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so, it's also really interesting because, and we're going to talk a bit more about this was a family affair. His wife, Alma, was credited for screenwriting in this film and was there the entire time. It was also a film that was rare at the time to be shot on location. Santa Rosa, he wanted to be in the town, even though they ended up having to do some reshoots of studio shoots because that's how they roll. But it was by and large shot on location in Santa Rosa with all the trappings of this, traditional small town, even though it is made to seem quite large, with the amount of people that are milling about, which is so unrealistic in my mind, because that would never happen.
New York City finds its way into Santa Rosa.
Yeah, he's like, we need to show this is a very busy town with a cop that's kind of literally policing the crosswalk because there's so many people walking about, which is kind of funny. And so he was looking for, quote unquote, that innocent America. And he loves to toy with that.
Which is interesting. I mean, it's one of the things. So I taught this movie when I was teaching an American film genres class at SUNY Westbury in Long Island. And so, but Kyle got me the job, and I was teaching a genres class. And I taught this movie as a kind of look at the prototypical noir. And one of the things that's interesting about the noir is really they say it officially starts with Double Indemnity and Billy Wilder and 44. And, you have the beginning of the, probably the greatest American genre, arguably. But I think, and a lot of it was directed by Europeans who had left Europe in the kind of existential angst of World War II. And I think it's interesting how Hitchcock with this film kind of kicks off the idea of the noir. I mean, it fits all of the trappings of the noir. It kind of it does certain things differently. It doesn't stay in the city. It doesn't stay in various things. But when I watched this film the first time and then ultimately taught it, I was like, what an interesting kind of, mapping of the noir, which people will take elsewhere and do different things with. But at the heart of this film, there is this sense of evil lurks at the bottom of humanity. And let's take a deep look at that psychologically, which I think the noir does well. And this film is actually that in some ways is what it is about.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how Hitchcock's I don't need to go into the city to tell that story. I think it's
Yeah.
less interesting because it's so obvious. Like it does start with a bit of the menace of the dirtiness of the city because Uncle Charlie, the played by Joseph Cotton, is introduced as someone who's living in a boarding house and he's being watched by men that are for misdoings of his, most likely because he has cash that's spread on the night table by his bed and he's just lying lazily about and absent-minded of it, and using the woman who runs the boarding house to like push against, as they would most likely do. It's like strangers, like I'm going to protect my tenant, of course, never mind who the government is or the police or whatever they are. And so that underbelly you're speaking of is presented like it exists in the city, but he's like, no, 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 I'm going to bring it to the suburbs, you
It's
know.
interesting too. I mean, I like that framing of the beginning of this film is a real big part of it because it creates that kind of, space of the boarding house, right? And
Yeah.
we do see some of that in Santa Rosa ultimately, not the boarding house, but a different kind of like dive bar. But
Yeah.
there is this sense that, you have it. And I don't know, have you seen Robert Siodmak's I think it's 46, The Killers, that rework of Ernest Hemingway's Killers. It's
No.
1940. It's amazing. It's one of the great noirs, I think. I mean, I love it. But anyway, it's starring Burt Lancaster. And Burt Lancaster is up in his room doing the same thing that Joseph Cotton is doing, or Uncle Charlie is doing in this. And there's a moment here when Uncle Charlie is like, the landlady comes in and she's like, "There's two men. They're looking for you. I didn't tell them we were here." And he's like, "I don't
Mhm.
care. I'll deal with them, or I'll even go down and meet them." Like there was a sense like he was getting ready to either, take them on, kind of commit a form of suicide or something else like that. Well, that's exactly what happens. 3 years later in Robert Siodmak's, The Killers. It ends with, Burt Lancaster's character irrevocably giving himself over to fate and allowing these two killers come up and kill him. And it's a really powerful scene. And it's very similar to this scene out of Shadow of a Doubt. So I think this film has a lot more impact on that genre than it's often given credit for. And I think a lot of those European directors who come over and make some of the best noirs are using this as their template.
Yeah, I can imagine that makes a lot of sense, and it would be in the realm of Hitchcock to be this person who leads the way for all of
Yeah.
us, audiences as well as, filmmakers. And that's what's so wonderful about him. And he loves Santa. I mean, there was a story, and I can't remember what it would describe how they found Santa Rosa, and he liked it as this simple, polite tree line, community with their nice old trees and the friendly police that walk you across the street and make sure you don't get run over, but you must respect that rule, otherwise I'll arrest you. It's like for jaywalking. And this is in what's so interesting is the language of ordinariness and typical and normal comes up again and again and again throughout this film, and it's presented in a variety of ways, the first of which is really um, when we learn there's a pair of surveyors that want to do like the equivalent of a census. They're like from the Census Bureau, and we want to interview you and talk about you. You're a prototypical mammy. It's like you might say it would be something that would be turned into a Life magazine feature of the true American family, right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's what we're presented with again and again and again in the early types of this family. And but who's wise to this and bored with this idea or musing about what does that really mean is Charlie, young Charlie, who we're introduced to as a much older sibling than her two younger siblings. And the dynamic of that is like never explained, but it is interesting because it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you will, if you think about it, like you have Joe, who's the patriarch of the family, and Emma, who's the mother, the homemaker, the caretaker of the house and the home. They're older parents, right?
Yeah.
Yet they have this what you would expect older daughter who's in her early 20s who's living at home because she's unmarried, and that makes a lot of sense. But they also have two kids that are pretty young, and so even though they're supposed to be an ordinary family, you're not like the Leave It to Beaver family of the 50s where it's like, there's these two kids that are on they're on this, it's a boy and a girl, and they're on this path, and so that's a little weird. Does
I
that
wonder.
ring
I
true,
want
or
a little weird, but I wonder if it's also historical. And I'm spitballing here because
oh,
I
okay,
don't
good.
know. But like
Help me make sense of
you do have like say, let's just say Charlie's 16 or 17,
no,
finishing high
she's
school, right?
do you think that she represents, she's finished high school. They show a
Okay,
graduation photo.
even better. So that makes her like she was born like 25, 26. 3 years later, the depression hits, right? And then you don't really probably have
Oh,
kids or really
right.
do that stuff until later in the mid to late 30s, which would explain even like it would maybe explain why there's a spread out there.
Okay.
Like things
All right.
went wrong, and they refer to the depression often in this film. They kind of
Yeah.
allude to the war
It
going on,
looms. Yeah. Yeah.
but the depression looms large, just like you said
Exactly.
with the opening shot, right?
Mhm.
The opening shot has, these kind of derelict buildings
Yeah.
where these people, homeless people, are living until we go to what seems like an upgrade, the boarding house, right? It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It is this space that stands apart. Like it somehow not only just survived the depression, it's almost like it existed in a bubble outside of the depression. Like there is no, the way that Santa Rosa is initially presented is like, oh, we're all cool here. Nothing happened. Look the other way. We're just good bankers now.
Exactly.
But it is frayed at the edges. But we'll get there. But what's so great is, let's get back to Charlie, our daydreaming Charlie, who is our parallel, like our twin to Uncle Charlie, who was also just lying about bed, daydreaming. But his thoughts are very different from young Charlie's thoughts. She's just sitting there, and she has what I think is interesting is like, she describes it later on as like this funny feeling of being an average family. And she very early on, as she's sitting there, her father comes home from work and is like walking about, hi family, how are you doing? And she comes up to say hello to Charlie. And they have she has like this existential conversation with him about,
Exactly.
and you're like, whoa, man, Charlie, you are deep. What are some of the quotes? I got to get them right here. She's talking about, here it is. Have you ever stopped to think that a family should be the most wonderful thing in the world, and that this family has just gone to pieces? And Joe's like, dude, man, I just got a raise. Things are good,
Exactly. I got a raise. Where's your mom?
Yeah, I need to drink a beer. It's like, where's the alcohol? Damn it.
Well, there is that sense. I like that you say existentialism, because there's also this sense like she's sitting on the bed, and there are parallels with, Uncle Charlie sitting on the bed that are interesting throughout the film. But there's this ennui, right? Like there's this sense that life is uninteresting or has no
Yeah.
meaning. And that's what we saw early with Charlie when he was maybe about to go and be suicidal. Yet she's doing it from a very different point of view. And a lot of this film is about, her Bildungsroman, right? Her growing up to see what the world is really like and having that epiphany. But like, I was struck by it. And I think it's worth saying right from the beginning, a lot of what makes this film so powerful is the writing. And
Oh
Hitchcock,
yeah.
specifically reached out to Thornton Wilder, who had won, he had this famous Art Town play, which was about basically the American ideal that you're talking about, this small family America that like he was really idolizing. And Hitchcock went to him and he said, look, I want you to do kind of what you did with Art Time, but I want you to do like the evil twin brother of it. and that's what Thornton Wilder does. He kind of
Yeah.
takes his own work and he says, what if this Art Town was actually like a cynical, dark reality, And that's what we get. And I think that's kind of, in Hitchcock, as you mentioned, referred to this as his favorite film. And you talked about this in the notes. And a lot of, I think, is probably because of his one-on-one relationship with the author in writing it, and then his family writing it as well, his wife. But like, I think he had a very unique opportunity to shape this thing in ways that probably he didn't do for a lot of his other works.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's so interestingly prescient about these the future discontent, like as you described in our notes, post-war discontent. Like she's already a young girl who's seeing the future problem with no name, right? The Betty
Yeah,
Friedan, feminine mystique, the perfect housewife that is like happy to be
totally.
doting on her partner. And boy, he really dives into that. And we're going to go really into that because she, in this same conversation with her dad, is she's saying, I don't want to be my mom. Basically, it's like I don't want to just do the dishes and make the house nice. And there is this moment later on where Uncle Charlie's arrived and she's in his room because that's where he gets to stay. He takes over her room and she's inserted with her younger sister in their room, in a room together.
Yeah.
And Uncle Charlie is looking at her as a proud graduate of high school. And it's really great because it's also super small town because in that photo, there's only four or five other girls, right, that are graduating with her. Right. Because in which speaks of a couple of things. It's like that's how few girls are going all the way through high school, maybe. Right. And
Yeah.
finishing their high school degrees. And maybe that's an avatar of like those are the girls that would normally go on to college. But we learn that that doesn't necessarily happen when we meet the girl who's working in the bar later in the film.
Oh, that
Yeah.
girl is
Yeah,
fascinating.
we'll get
Yeah.
there because that stuff is important. And so the idea of the home being this space of ordinariness that's safe and perfect is pulled apart immediately by Charlie. And the other one that's so great is, what does she say? Not only is it going to pieces, and when because we'd already spoken about how he's like, I just got a raise, and it's like she's like, how can you talk about money when I'm talking about souls? Like her
Exactly.
teenage angst is so wonderful. It's so early and clear, right? And
Oh
that's where
my
dad's
God.
like, I need a drink. It's so good. She's like, Jesus, let's take it down a notch, man.
And you're right. From the very beginning, we go from the boarding house in, Newark, New Jersey,
Uh-huh.
to the bedroom in Santa Rosa. And like, it's just beautiful how he sets up these two universes and then they start to collide. And the train, in some ways, is that thing that comes in and
Yeah.
brings them together. I love the use of the train
Yeah.
and this, even though it's somewhat simple in the beginning and the end, I just think it really works really well. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man with
Uh-huh.
that vision of this big machine
Uh-huh.
coming through the town. I just love it.
Yeah. And so you're presenting the introduction of the reintroduction, or just like Uncle Charlie arriving to town. And that's a really big part of this, and like how Uncle Charlie is a classic family interloper, even though he's literally family. Uh,
Yeah.
and we're going to get into that a lot here. And what's so wonderful is the way that to Charlie, the twinning, which becomes something that's very that's described literally, is so important. Is like they share the same name. She's Charlotte, he's Charles, but everybody calls both of them Charlie. So it's Uncle Charlie and Young Charlie throughout the film, and just so for the viewers and listeners, that's how. Don't be sorry if we confuse you with too many Charlies.
Yeah, exactly.
It's intentional ultimately. Um, but he in the way that she views him as the way to get the family out of this rut, their boringness, their staidness, and how he's going to take them to this place, this magical space that she needs to go to in the excitement and his glamour. Ooh, the city's coming to town. And there is an enthrallment with Uncle Charlie about the whole city sees him this way. And it's kind of marvelous, the idea of like such a small town would be so interested in. It's like, oh, wow, there's a new man in town. And literally there are women that are like, oh, there's a new man in town. And there are men that are like, oh my gosh, he's from the city and he has money and like blah blah. He has a celebrity to him, which is
Yeah,
really
maybe he can come give a talk. I love that
I know,
idea.
like
It's like, you're
talk
new
to
to
who and
town?
where, like
Come give a talk to us.
yeah. It's like,
Love
and that
that.
actually happens too,
It
which is really
does. I love that. And people show up, and we haven't had such a great talk since a foreigner. Usually, only foreigners give good talk like that. I love that.
yeah. What? Yeah, that is Hitchcock. Maybe that is about the Europeans' like influence on American understanding of themselves
Maybe
in
I
the
do
film.
think so. there's
Yeah.
something there, I think, because that
Yeah.
whole foreigner thing and Americans maybe not being able to
Yeah.
see themselves only through that
Yeah.
eye, and that comes up in noir. So anyway, yes.
Yeah. And so this introduces one of my favorite parts. There's two, another favorite part of the film is this kind of battle for, I called it the battle for the head of the table. That is
Yeah.
that Joe, as the patriarch of the house, immediately kind of accedes to Uncle Charlie. He gets the head of the table at dinner, and this first family dinner is important. Like, I think there's so many family dinners in our movies we've seen, and the dinner table is still this place of discourse that we get an update on how is the family doing, and how they relate to one another in this space is an emblem of the health or lack of health of a family. Whether it's like classic teenage angst, and it is probably the more typical, the John Hughesian or Cameron Crowe description of family is like teenagers that don't want to listen to their parents, and parents just not wanting to deal with them. But there's other families, and I think one of the ones that this is interesting as an interloper, and you're going to love this, is this reminded me a lot of The Stepfather. All right. The
Oh,
Terry
interesting.
O'Quinn
Totally.
stepfather character
Yeah.
who comes in, and he's supposed to be this, he is real malcontent, but he hides it so well as this respectable character. And so that's the wolf in sheep's clothing that Hitchcock loves here, is like the menace comes not with horns like a horny devil. He comes as this person that we all adore, and he's respectable, and Terry O'Quinn is this wonderful man who's going to marry this woman who needs a new husband. And similarly, this is the idea. It's like, even though there is a patriarch, Joe is like a good man. He may be like, modest in position, but and he represents like just incremental and advancement in life. But no, we need to do things fast and quick, and Emma needs this, his wife, like, because they're battling for affections of Emma. I think Joe loses immediately because Emma is equally enthralled with her brother.
Yeah.
He represents a lot to her, and we're going to talk about that a bit more.
I
But how do
love, can I just say that I
yeah, yeah,
love
yeah.
that you made the comparison with Stepfather?
Oh,
Thank
there's
you.
more. There's more
That's
coming.
so good.
It's come. There's more to it
Love
because
it.
yeah, the middle class white male rage is really where the real seeds of comparison belong. And
Oh, that's
because
right. You're bringing us back to that. That's so
yeah,
good.
yeah, oh, it's coming. It's coming. But I mean, to speak a lot more about this, there's two things about the way that Charlie kind of attacks this role and takes over. First, it's he plies everyone with gifts, right? And these gifts are extravagant, and he gives Joe his first wristwatch, and like he's like, ooh, everybody at the bank's gonna think of me so fancy. Because think about like the emotion of having time on your wrist. I mean, imagine, it just must be crazy how expensive wristwatches were back then. It's like everybody just had, having a clock was still a thing, technically.
Exactly.
And he gives his sister a first stole, and there's lovely things for little Roger and Annie, or Anna. Is it Anna? Annie? I'm blanking. What's the younger daughter's name?
I'll
Is it,
tell you.
um,
It is Anne.
Anne, yeah. And she's the classic Hitchcock brainy little girl, which is lovely. And she's constantly like poking at everyone who don't have things quite right. But she doesn't play a large role, but she's
I'm
great.
reading Ivanhoe, Daddy. Not like you.
Yeah,
Like, she's making fun of what her dad reads, which is so wonderful. And
yeah.
she has one of those early moments on the phone when she gets a call from the basically the place to say, hey, you have a telegram.
Oh,
I don't
right,
know what
right.
it would
The
be
opera,
called,
yeah,
the post office or
yeah.
whatever it is. And she'd be like, I don't have a pencil handling, and I have to keep my mind free of, for the real important things I need to think about. Like, everyone in this world and this house is kind of on this existential intellectual level. Whereas the parents are completely like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
The kids are all like seemingly like rarefied intellectuals, save maybe
Yeah.
the little boy, and the parents are just like, kind of dolts. It's
Yeah,
really
well, I mean,
interesting.
even Roger does get his moment at this first dinner where, because it does come up, like Uncle Charlie not only flashes, gifts and extravagance, he flashes money. Like he talks about, I have 30, $40,000 to get
Which
into your
must have
bank,
been a
Joe.
fortune in
It's like in
43.
today's dollars, it's almost like $800,000. That would have been
Jesus.
like a stupefying amount of money to
Yeah.
talk about in front of your family. And it's like, hey, and for Joe, who's a banker, to bring in a client of this stature, he knows it's going to be meaningful. It's not a
Yeah.
small deal. But the funny thing is, as this money's brought up, it's little Roger who goes who says about aloud, who muses like, "Don't let the government know about that; they'll try to take it from you." Little libertarian.
Which is a theme again. That's another theme that comes up again. Is this the role of the government in this movie?
Yeah. And so, but as part of this jousting is a bit of emasculation of Joe too, right? And
Yeah.
and this is especially the case when they visit the bank and he does open an account, and he's taken young Charlie with him to basically have her witness his like power play over her father.
Yeah.
And he's joking in front of everyone aloud and making him super uncomfortable because Joe is simply just a bank teller. He's like a 55, 60-year-old bank teller, right? And this is like a great job in the post depression era, World War II. It's stable, but he's not going to be a man of stature. And he makes fun of him. It's like, oh, we all know what banks are, which is kind of true. Like,
It is interesting, right? That seems very
yeah,
like how would you say contemporary
yeah,
with him talking shit on the banks and not
uh-huh,
trusting the banks and everyone's taking a little bit off the top and it
yeah,
seemed like wow, like I kind of agreed with Uncle Charlie even though he was being a
exactly.
complete dick to Joe.
Yeah, this is the first of a number of times where and this is what's so wonderful about Hitchcock, because even though, this is spoken about many times, and this is not treading new ground here, but he's a true complex villain, and
Yeah.
Hitchcock does not want one-dimensional mustache twirling villains. This is a man who we actually align with in a lot of his thinking until he starts to go over the top,
Yeah.
and which we'll be getting to. But in this moment, even though he's being kind of a jerk to Joe and talking trash about banks and talking about embezzlement, and even young Charlie's like, why are you doing that? That's not good. You don't do this. You're making fun of my father, basically. But he's doing it to assert his power over the space. And my other really favorite one is when he finally meets the bank manager, and there's the talk of the actual money itself, and he just describes how it doesn't mean anything to him at all. It's like $40,000 is no joke, not to him talking about the bank manager, but to me, it's a joke. The whole world's a joke to me. And this is the
Exactly.
beginning of like, whoa, what a fucking nihilist this guy is. Like,
Yeah,
what
and
is
he's a
going
little
on
bit of
here?
a joker here, right? Like
Yeah.
from from Dark Knight. It's like, what?
Yeah.
He also says this. Charlie says this to the banker, and I love this line, and you can feel, you can feel the writer all over it. Heaven takes care of fools and scoundrels. And
Yeah.
you could see the banker like doesn't know what to do with that. Both
Oh,
wants to agree with it, but also is like, like, oh wait. And all of that quoting in relationship, like you're saying, to the history of the last decade, the depression, the banks basically, screwed over the population with the
yeah.
richest 1% getting richer, things that we can relate to in 2026 for sure. Like they hit hard. And Hitchcock, in this beautiful way, is alluding to all that,
Yep.
is making criticism of all that. But, you would never read that. You would just read this as like a bad character doing bad things potentially. But there's it, like you said, it's a double-edged sword there. He's both saying things you agree with in retrospect, but then
Uh-huh.
also being a jerk to his
Yeah.
brother-in-law because he wants a power play.
Yeah, yeah, and that power play, my favorite one of them is the newspaper power play, like where he takes the position of the father who sits after, while everyone's still cleaning after dinner, he sits with his cigar and starts reading the paper, but there's something disturbing in the paper, so he makes a game of turning the paper into a house and tearing it up to show to Roger, and Roger's like, or no, to Anne, and Anne's like, I'm not a little baby, I don't care about paper houses. But the whole point is, at the same time, all the kids are like, what the hell are you doing to Papa's paper, man? Like, that's his newspaper. The newspaper is the source of authority, and that is the source of the man of the house, is like space to understand the world and present it back to the children.
And making that even more complex, Joe, the father who is being kind of, abused in this sense, could care less. He just wants to talk about murder mysteries with his best friend. So he's as much a kid as the rest of the kids. And obviously, Anne alludes to that early on, because Anne's like, Dad, I don't read the trashy mystery stuff, real, basically like true crime murder stuff. I read Ivanhoe. I read real literature. And so the dad is interesting in that he almost seems happy to be done with that stuff so he can just do the stuff he's interested in.
He's already in retirement, even though he's working as a bank teller. He's like, I mean, my wife makes my dinner. I get to read my mystery stories. I get to... Herb, played by Corwin, is just so awesome. Hume Corwin, and like, they're like comic relief basically throughout the film. But you're right, he's such a boyish little man. Like, the way he's just like, it's so great. Like, Joe is just like they just joke endlessly about like how they would love to murder one another.
How they would kill each other. And it's wonderful. Another great Hitchcock device is, while they're talking about the best way to kill each other, that starts to become a reality within the house.
I would just, Jim, just so you know, I'm making a little mushroom soup here. But, I might slip in a couple poisonous ones.
Exactly.
And your response is, I'm just going to hit you over the head. It's just easier.
Or, I know it's been done before, but I'm going to stand you up in the bathtub, right? I'm going to slip you out from under your feet and hold your head down.
Just drown you. That's easy, right? No one would ever do.
So good. So that is just a great piece of this story, of this movie, is those two. And I think that's what makes it complicated with Charlie. Charlie's almost walking into a role that's been vacated.
Yeah, I mean, or in an interesting way, like, he's not interested in lording over his family, even if you think of it in a better way. It's like let's leave that position vacant because it's an asshole's position,
True.
And so in some ways, Joe's just a respectable, good man in that regard. Like, I'm not looking to lord over my ability to provide over my family.
Agreed. No, that's a better way to look at it.
Yeah. And so, which
you're right, Michael. And when you're right, you're right, and you're right.
And so, the funny thing is, like, I how we approach these, and we've evolved in the podcast. Very early on, I think we were much more plot driven, and now I'm just like, what's the plot? I don't know. I'm just interested in these themes. And this next one is probably one of the ones that I'm closest to and most interested in, is Hitchcock playing this early prescient storytelling of the problem with no name, the Betty Friedan feminine mystique idea of women that are not happy with their role in life, and Emma, who is the mother of the home, and the way she's introduced early as just obsessed with the typical domestic life of her generation, and those routines, and the recipes and the housekeeping. And then we've mentioned briefly about how the detectives pretending to be surveyors, like from the Census Bureau, come in, and they're trying to photograph the house, and Uncle Charlie and even young Charlie are both like, what are you doing letting these strangers in our house? And she's like, oh, never mind that. It's like, but just please don't photograph that bench. The slip covers off. Or like, please, if you need to photograph me making a cake. Let's get it just right. It's like, show up when I'm about to crack the egg. And so the person playing the photographer, Detective Saunders, is like, okay, go crack the egg. And she's like, what are you talking about? I have to fold the egg into I have to fold the butter into the sugar first, and then you should come back when I need to add the egg. And I was like, that's actually how you make a cake. I know exactly what she's fucking talking about. But the funny thing is, Saunders is so uninterested, and so she's the trope of the boring wife, right?
Yeah.
And,
and and the presence of home economics that dominated the sense, right,
yeah.
of the 40s and 50s, and that gets even worse in the 50s when it becomes like you're no longer at work, because this is also fighting another reality at this moment in 43. Rosie the Riveter, right?
Yeah.
So many women actually are work. They're doing that work that's
Hmm.
pushing the war effort forward. And then, the feminine mystique and all that, they argue about. There was a dramatic and a very intentional shift to put those women back in the home, right?
Right.
And to use consumer culture as a kind of means to give these men their jobs once they returned. And,
Hmm.
so like film noir again, like there's a lot of that there. And it was such a fucked up moment post World War II with all the different things that were happening. But it's interesting, like you said, that Hitchcock has his finger on that here.
Yeah, he already does. And, Emma, in inviting Charlie to give the speech to the town, which is we're all still like wondering, like, why do towns have strangers give speeches? But she's
This is how I kill the widows.
and that's another random thing. Like
He's
when
like this with his hands
yeah.
shaking.
I mean, as another aside, like back at the bank when he gives the $40,000 to the manager, it's cash, and it's not a suitcase full of cash. It's literally like 40 bills. So it's like this man had $40,000 banknotes on it back when banknotes of that scale still existed, which were supposed to be like banknotes in exchange from bank to bank. And it's like, this guy's like, whatever. So back to, she speaks of Emma. It's like, oh, just talk about things that women like myself would want. Busy with our homes, most of us. That's just us. That's what I am. And for most of it, we're just like, poor Emma. She is lost. But finally, there is a moment at the last dinner. We don't know it's the last dinner that Charlie's going to be leaving, or maybe no. I think has he announced that he's leaving finally? I think he
He
has.
does
No,
announce it, and that's
no, but
what
it's not.
brings her to say
No, it's
that.
not a dinner. It's after the talk. Actually, he announces it.
Yeah, it's like a little soiree at the party after
Right,
at the
right.
house after
But
the
this is
talk.
where Emma does this reflection. I think it's at that moment,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And it's just, it's so sad, like, because she's realizing like she's gonna lose this person who reminds her of who she was, a person who is interesting. Maybe she was also educated like her daughter was, but she got married, and that takes over your life. You have kids. And the direct quote is so sad. She says, you sort of forget forget you're you. That's the direct quote. You sort of forget you're you. You're your husband's wife. And you're like, damn,
Yeah,
that's brutal.
yeah.
And if that were the focus of the film, she would seem quite desperate, right? But it's just a quiet little moment of like, oh, I'm losing my brother. He has to leave again. But that's the ordinariness that we're just kind of no. That's part of this underbelly too that Hitchcock reveals, which is so wonderful.
And I also wondered in your notes, in the production notes, one of the reason why Hitchcock said it was his favorite film was because he got to work with his whole family, which
Yeah,
means his daughter and his wife. And that's super interesting because in some ways, even the production of this or his understanding of his work and that relationship to the people in his family kind of counteracts, the logic of this, normal,
yeah.
ordinary American family. And I think that's part of that very subtle, but really, I'd say sharp critique he's laying out here.
Yeah, he knows smart women, and they need
Yeah.
more, right? Like his
Totally.
daughter Patty, who was interviewed for the short documentary, talks so much about how she was given opportunity to be part of the family business, right? Filmmaking, and it almost resigned. He's like a homesteader, it reminded me of the immigrants, right? And it's like
Yeah.
he's a homesteader of filmmaking, and they're all gonna do the work with him. That's part of the family kind of endeavor. And she became, the coach to the actress who was a first time actress in that played Anne. Oh,
Yeah,
I
who
don't.
Hitchcock had, he had great hopes for her. He thought she was going
Yeah,
to immediately be a star. Edna May
right.
Wanacott.
Yeah. And she Patty reflects proudly of how she was allowed to do that. She had that role on set. Meanwhile, while his wife also had a large role in the shaping of the story of the film, literally
Yeah.
to the point that she gets a credit. And so, yeah, it's this wonderful counterpoint to this situation that we're introduced to of the woman who doesn't know what to do with herself, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so, but to now get into the meat of the story, which is the Charlie dualness here, which is interesting because as we had set out early on to discuss, Charlie sees in Uncle Charlie, young Charlie sees in Uncle Charlie, he's the solution to her boredom, her rut that their family's in. But it turns out to be very much a canard for many reasons, and in large part is that he's this crazy misogynist that sees women in a very specific role, right?
Which actually completely builds on your previous theme. Like, in fact, he is a serial killer who has some deep psychological. We don't get into the full psychological Hitchcock here, but there's some deep psychological problems with these women of power.
Yeah.
And he wants to actually strangle them and does.
Right. And control them. And that's the stepfather again, like his discontent, because he again and again and again has many, many quotes about what is wrong with society now. And part of that is women getting power, right? Like maybe he's speaking of the Rosie the Riveters, but never mentioning them. He kind of imbues it in widows that inherit money and like they don't deserve this money. Like, because God knows raising a family, that's bullshit compared to the work that men do and go out into the world and earn actual hard dollars for. And to just get it and insufferably spend it. Oh my God, his speech at dinner is brutal. It's so performative and exaggerating of this idea, but it's crazy. Like I would love to have imagined men and women reacting to that speech like would they what is that couple's conversation like after that movie,
Absolutely. I mean, and it is real. Like Joseph Cotton, we haven't really talked about him, but like he is great as the kind of, duplicitous uncle who comes, like you said, as a sheep in wolf's clothing. And like he keeps it all together really well. I mean, he loses it with his hands a little bit, trying to maybe, go after someone. But it's not until this scene where it's that whole Jerry Blake scene from The Stepfather, like, who am I here? Right? Like on the phone, like, oh, I'm Jerry Blake, and he forgets himself. But this is a moment where he completely forgets himself, and the insanity that runs his world becomes apparent for all at the dinner table, because that's where this happens, to see. And I think that's where everyone's like, whoa, I hope you don't say this to the widows.
I'll read some of this speech because this is in response to like Emma's request, like, what do you talk about in your town speech? Right. And this is his response. It's like, talking about, because she had said, it's like, oh, just talk about busy women like me. And she's like, well, women keep busy in towns like this, but the cities, it's different. The cities are full of women, middle-aged widows, husbands dead, husbands who spent their lives making fortunes, working, and then they die and leave their money to their wives, their silly wives. And what do these wives do? These useless women? It just goes on from there. It's like you see them in hotels, the best hotels, drinking that money, eating the money, losing the money at bridge, playing all day and all night, smelling of money, proud of their jewelry, but nothing else. Horrible, faded, fat, greedy women. And you're just like, whoa.
This is almost like if you took this out of context and you had the Charlie character in this famous, like in this rich hotel preying on these women. That would be a whole nother movie, like Maniac with Joe Spinell, like just this crazy serial killer narrative. Like, and that's the thing about this movie that fascinates me. It's like, this is like about a serial killer who comes to his sister's family and tries to pretend he's not a psycho.
No. And that's the stepfather, ultimately, who's
It
also
is
a
the
serial.
stepfather.
He's also a
Exactly.
serial killer who literally murders families when he's done with them.
You are right. This is Stepfather was, I mean, Stepfather did it a little bit better, I have to say, than Hitchcock, but
What?
I'm
Yes,
kidding.
yeah, I know, because we got an axe murder scene, a la like, The Shining. There's a bloody hallway. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
love that.
crazy. Yeah, and this is so wrapped up, and this is the other part of this. This is so wrapped up in Charlie's vision of, this his nostalgic vision of society, right? And how it's supposed to be. And here's the weirdness of this is some of his nostalgia is also this prediction of post-war
Yeah.
malcontent. And this is where we haven't spoken yet about Jack Graham. Jack Graham is the detective who is surreptitiously, inserted himself into this family as well, pretending to be a surveyor and pretending, he builds a relationship with young Charlie for the sake of turning against her uncle, because her
Yeah.
uncle to her is everything in the beginning. She speaks, what was the specific line of, you know he back at the gifts giving scene, she's enthralled by him, and she says, I know something nobody knows, something secret and wonderful about you. We're sort of like twins. She introduces like his mysticalness, right?
Yeah.
But it's Jack Graham who pulls it apart and does this in a really, really deliberate way, because Uncle Charlie is on the lam, as we've already discussed. Basically, he's a serial killer, and we're learning that the G-men are coming. They're looking for him and some other guy in Maine, apparently. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. There's two potential, one trying to get to Canada and one in Santa Rosa.
yeah, who's hiding out in a suburban family rather than trying to get out and go to Mexico or get on a boat to China. um, but at the same time, in this hiding out, we have the G-men who show up, and the discontent is also a discontent with the government, right?
Yeah.
And he tells early on his niece and his sister, like, don't let those people in the house, don't trust them. And we're like, yeah, don't trust them, not a good idea. you know and when they do come in and they're like saying, hey, we're just going to take photographs, and hey, why don't you tell us what clubs and organizations you belong to? and young Charlie's like, wait, what?
Yeah,
She's
exactly.
also, so she's aligning herself with her uncle, and like, wait, no, this isn't right here. And so there's parts of this, nostalgia for like privacy and being, alone, and the way things were, we kind of agree with. And that's what's so interesting, right?
Yeah, totally. And there is that, I love the way you frame that. There is that double sense where you kind of agree with her. It's like, you know that he's at that point they come in, Charlie is questionable, but you still
Oh, yeah.
completely side with Charlie. You're like, Charlie, like, yeah, don't let those, G-men in your house. This is a total prank. How can the mom not see it? And
Uh-huh.
Charlie's about to go off on women being silly and not being able to see these things. But at the level of his sister, he pulls back a little bit, and he
Right.
still pulls back with Charlie. But there is that still kind of weirdness, kind of, which we'll see again in Psycho, maybe happening. But like at this point, you are kind of like, as you said, like Charlie's not one dimensional. He has a lot of things you agree with. His
Right.
critiquing of the banks, his not trusting of the government, his understanding that we're just coming out of a kind of really weird situation as a country, and are kind of almost propped up by a war that whether he agrees with or not, you don't know, but they never go there. But yeah, I agree with you. It's an interesting setup of now the government comes in, and what
Yeah.
does that mean?
And what does it mean is Jack Graham, Detective Jack Graham, is infatuated with young Charlie initially because, he presents himself as like, you need to, tell me about your uncle. What do you see? Tell me, and it's like, because he's not a good guy. And she's like, but this is early in the film, and she still has this like spell over her about him. and he's like pointing out to her, like, look at the fraying edges, which is reasonable in a lot of ways because there are frayed edges that she has seen already, like the ring that is given to her has these initials that, and she's like, ooh, an inscription. She's like, who's like SB and CS? And it's like, I don't know what it's like. And he's like, oh darn, those darn jewelers, they fouled this up. I'll bring it back, to fix it. And she's like, no, I love it as it is. Weird.
Yeah.
And so she admits to some misgivings to Jack Graham, and he immediately he puts the hammer on her and says, you're going to keep your mouth shut because you're a nice girl. And you're like, fuck, Jack, man.
Yeah. He's like, you're going to keep your mouth shut because we're going to get him one way or the other. And it was
Right.
immediately it was like 0 to 60. And it reminded me of the whole point when we did Say Anything, when Jim Court is essentially stealing and the FBI is turning the daughter, Diane, against the father.
Right.
And you felt that a little bit, like the government had worked its way in and seeded that doubt that now young Charlie has to figure out. And this is kind of like, almost the struggle of the next, 30, 40 minutes of the film is her trying to balance her love with her uncle with coming to terms with what she sees to be true.
Right. And how she finds all out about this, it's kind of weird because ultimately, Uncle Charlie admits to young Charlie, like, yes, I did this, pretty much. And the way he does it, but he bullies her too, and this is when, I think we've already had the brutal speech about women. And, and Charlie is, young Charlie is very suspicious at this point. And, she hasn't connected again with the Detective Graham in some time. But Uncle Charlie knows, she has been influenced, and she drags her to this scene, which is so important. They have a walk through town, and he wants to kind of get her on side with him because he still sees in her hopeful infatuation has been maintained. This fiction of his mythology. But he drags her into a bar, and this is the one that you were so interested in. And talk about the bartender, the woman who's the server,
the waitress. She's great. The barmaid. Well, as we talked about in the beginning, you had this boarding house, right, which is very noir with these kind of in between spaces. These people have come back from war. They only have enough to kind of fund, and they're looking to kind of put their life back together. But it's usually some sort of existential angst. The other situation in those are usually like dive bars.
Yeah.
Right? These bars where people go and even Charlie, young Charlie, as she goes in and he brings her up, he's like, Uncle Charlie, I would never go to a place like this. And this is like Santa Rosa's seedy side, right? And Charlie goes in there, he's completely at home. He orders a drink, I forget what, but the barmaid is a friend of young Charlie's
from school.
And she tells her basically unlike you, my life hasn't been so easy. And I've ended up here through a series of misfortunes. And it's almost like, she's at the end of her line. And this is also symbolically the place where Charlie comes clean to his niece that I did some bad things. And that's all right. But you can't abandon me now. And if you do, who knows what will happen to you. But the fact that it all happens in this seedy bar, in this space, and I love the spaces of noir that happen here, and kind of set you up for what's to come in the rest of the film, is interesting. In Santa Rosa now, you see it has another side. It's not all these beautiful streets. It's not all these perfect, the free public library and all the other beautiful, the house. We haven't even talked about the house in this movie.
Yeah.
The house in this movie is so iconic.
Yeah.
You see it so many times. It's this Italianate house with these beautiful, ivy coming up. And it's just gorgeous. And this is this first space we see in Santa Rosa that's nothing like that.
Yeah, but what's important, the house is interesting because production note wise, they talked about how they found this house and they were so excited about it because it was not pristine perfect, and it was dingy, and they liked that. And there is a quote from Emma, the mother character, about like being a hostage to the house too, and then it's endless needed repairs, which again evokes stuff from today, right? This idea of
Sure.
being shackled to your one asset that doesn't seem to produce income. Instead, it just produces pain of I need to take care of it. But anyway, you know, but back in this bar, this is when I think, Uncle Charlie gives his second big speech, if you will, where he's like totally gaslighting young Charlie effectively, but telling her how the world works. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, you're just an ordinary little girl living in an ordinary little town. You go through your ordinary little day, and at night you sleep your untroubled, ordinary little sleep-filled, peaceful, stupid dreams. But I brought you nightmares. He's like, that's the way he reveals himself. It's like, I'm your nightmare, bitch. She's like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. Like, get me out of here.
That's hysterical. That's right. And I mean, his speeches, and he has two big ones, like you said, his speeches are dark.
Really dark. You live in a dream. You're a sleepwalker. You're blind. You know what the world is like? Do you know what the world is? A foul sty. Do you know if you rip the fronts of houses, you'd find swine? Like, the writing is intense in this film, as we've already described.
And it's a kind of almost analogous to what Savage, in the Savages, when he's talking about the retirement homes and how gaseous it is and how horrific. All looks good on the outside, it's all horrific on the inside. There was a little bit of that there. And it's interesting because that movie has, that movie hit me hard from our last series. And we did a series about, basically aging parents, and how we take care of them and what that looks like and how they do or don't respectably do it. And that movie and that kind of monologue reminded me a lot of this monologue from Charlie.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot. I think that, this is the end. This is the dispelling of her uncle's mystical qualities, because he says, like, he basically says, I did it. Right.
Yeah.
And she knows he's done it because she had already just gone to the library, and it's a classic Hitchcockian reveal of, like, she finds the newspaper article that he had early been hiding, and it says the Merry Widow Murderer, and there's all these lines in it. It's like, I'm just going to spell out to you literally with text what happened, and she's like, oh my God, my uncle. And she makes the connection between the initials of the widow that had been murdered and the husband's name, because they're both clearly in there. And so we can read back the ring's initials, and she has it. That she has the literal evidence of his murder, and she knows it to be true. And he's like, yeah, I fucking did it. What are you going to do about it? It'll ruin your mom. And that's what she uses.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because one of the things that happens is, I wasn't expecting this, but so much of this stuff happens and you already know. It's not like a surprise till the end. And like, you're like, oh, this is what happens.
Yeah.
It actually, you find out later. I mean, earlier than you would in a traditional kind of thriller. Right. Yeah. And that's interesting to me, the way Hitchcock, the suspense is still built, even though you know exactly, and all the characters know exactly what happened.
Yeah. So I know that you know, and you know that I know, and let's see how people play this out. And
I agree.
And so what's great is that in a Hitchcock way, he just decides to end it quickly, right? Suddenly, while the speech is happening, where Uncle Charlie is actually trying to murder young Charlie by, fumigating her in the garage with the car and pulling the key, which you can do, like, to leave the car running and pull the key so you can't turn it off.
and that gets to the point, like, we have these two old men, or these two men talking about how would you kill each other.
Back to Herb and Joe.
Uncle Charlie trying to kill his niece.
Yeah.
And he's pretty smart at it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
he's well practiced. He tries to break the steps as she's walking down the back
Uh-huh.
of the house. He breaks that. Hopefully she'll break his neck, or even if she doesn't, he'll meet her at the bottom and probably finish her off.
Yep.
And then the other one is this with fumigating the garage. So
Yeah.
she's, carbon monoxide poisoning. So I love that they're imagining it and then he's doing it.
And then Herb is the one who rescues her. It's like,
I love that.
which is great too. But it is this sense of like, and so that same evening they go off to do the talk, and the town loves his talk. It was amazing. And now young Charlie's like, I can't let him get away with this. Right.
Yeah.
He won't leave. I need this interloper out of her life. So she goes and finds the ring and she puts it back on. And he sees she's wearing it, and he recognizes that she's threatening him, right? By wearing the ring in this public space. Like, if I'm ready to reveal you now. And so he immediately, in the same, evening in which he's been, lauded for his wonderful contributions to the community, he says, I'm sorry, everybody, I got to go. Bye, I'm out, and
Exactly.
and young Charlie's like, oh my God, thank God. She's not happy about him getting away with it because she doesn't want the exposure to the family. That's something even the detectives like allude to, which is really funny. It's like,
It is weird.
just get him to leave so we can arrest him outside of town, right? And so, he agrees to leave, and there's this, official goodbye the next day with the train, and everybody gets on to check out his sleeping car, and little Anne and Roger are like, oh, this looks so great. And before you know it, young Charlie has been held hostage for a second while the train is now suddenly leaving, and he's about to shove her off the train, but instead he fumbles and falls to his death in front of an oncoming train. And that's Hitchcock is like, yeah, we're done with him. But what's important is the resolution, which is so fucking crazy, right? Because
It is weird.
he is immediately honored by the community, and his fiction is maintained by the community as this is an honorable man. But Jack Graham, Detective Jack Graham, comes back, and we learn that we know from earlier on, we haven't talked about this, Graham, in a weird way, suddenly professes his love to Charlie at this moment after she knows, but it's after the other Mary Walt's widower in Maine has been chopped by a plane propeller, which is funny. And so, it's not him. Thank God you didn't tell him to leave, right? Like, and so the detective thinks the case is solved, and he leaves to go on to other cases. But before he does so, he says, I love you, Charlie. I love you. And she's like, really? Are you sure? She's a little suspicious. This is a little rushed, but she's like, I'm open to it. But really? And that's classic Hitchcock too. He's like doing this thing where he's like, she's a smart woman. She knows this is a little odd. And then pretty soon after, she tries to reach out to him because she wants to like reveal her uncle. He's not around to be found, and he's not returning her calls. And it's only and it's only after he's dead he returns. And this is the double edge of Jack Graham. Like, he knows she knows, and she knows he knows, and they agree to not say anything. It's like, but at the same time, this is a man who, just before like the real quote unquote Maine bound Canada bound Mary Widow murderer has been killed, he has this agreeable conversation with Uncle Charlie where he says like, it's like, oh, I know you took my photo, let's not do that anymore because that privacy and freedom. And we agree with Uncle Charlie. It's like, yeah, that was kind of a dick move. Like, you invaded my house and took my photo and tried to use it to get me imprisoned or, take away my rights. And then, this is my thing about Jack Graham. One of I think is the most interesting characters that Hitchcock presents because he says, oh, we'll have a talk about freedom someday, Mr. Oakley. And it's not a threat about just his like potential imprisoning him. It's about a policing posture. It's like, state authorities going to reassert himself if you guys talk about your freedom too much. That's and the final line. What's that final quote he gives?
Sometimes it needs a lot of watching.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes out of control. like your Uncle Charlie. And I didn't even think about the sometimes it needs a lot of watching.
Yeah.
But that's the government basically saying, you fucking people need to all be watched and controlled, or else you'll go crazy like Uncle Charlie.
Yeah, and the Red Scare is coming, right?
Exactly. Boom. Perfect.
Yeah, and so that's the way I read this at the very end, is like Hitchcock sees an overly, watchful government is there to take away your liberty, potentially, your freedoms. And,
That's a good reading.
And young Charlie was leery of this from the beginning. And yet at the very end, he's like she's taking his hand, he's taking her hand. And what does she bound herself to in this final moment of the film? And it's classic, like films of that era. It's like, there's the final lines and there's no credits. It's like the end, movie projector stops, like everybody's out the door. And you're like, fuck, you don't even have this ruminating moment of post, movie credits, because they do the credits at the beginning of these films.
So, and it's interesting because, when I watched this movie twice in the last month, probably, and I was thinking, gosh, that is a weird last line.
Yeah.
And I didn't put it together. But once you started kind of, poking a little bit around the sergeant and the detective and what his whole situation is, it makes a lot of sense. Like, and this is Thornton Wilder and Alfred Hitchcock. Like, you can imagine a lot, and there's probably something to hang your hat on there.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting, not only is it a proto noir, but it's getting us ready for the Red Scare of the 50s. So it's like really prescient, right? I mean, I like that. And it makes it seem, because everyone talks about this film as one of his great, his first great masterpiece, and people come back to it again and again as just, truly one of his greats. And I don't know if I saw all that, because it reads differently than his later films, right? Like, they're a lot more cinematic in some ways than this one.
Right.
This one's far more literary. Yeah. And I think this time, talking about it with you and having watched it, back to back 2 times, I can see its masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of a different kind, but truly, prescient in how he's kind of digging in on that kind of America of its moment.
Yeah. And so, listeners, I hope you stick with us, because we've got a number of Hitchcock films. Not someone you normally would think of, someone that is focused on family. So I'm looking forward to diving into these with Jim and with you. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.